Um, Today I'm going to show you uh, how to work with Autolayout. For that I have created one project. Um, so before we move ahead, I would like to tell something about Autolayout. So before Autolayout we were using struts and springs, but after layout we have to deal with constraints. So basically the constraints are the rules which sets the frame of any UI view. Okay. um, so uh, there are two kind of views. First, which is like which can have their own contents. For example, UI label, you can assign some strings. So basically what it needs only x and y position of x and y position in the container, and rest it can manage itself. And the other kind of UI view is like normal UI view. um, so it doesn't have its own content, so you have to set some more constraints so that it can calculate its own frame. Okay, how it is done I'm going to show you now. So I have here a storyboard. You can see this one view controllers view. I'll make this I'll change the probably color and all so that it is maybe some this color probably, yeah. So this is just a UI view, and what I'm going to do is let's first try to use UI, try to add one label probably. Okay, so I'm going to add this thing. Okay, you can see there are no errors. In the left panel you can see if there are any error or any warning or anything else, you can see here in this left panel. Okay, so as of now, if you just run the application, let's see what happens. So it is coming okay, but let's add some more content here in the label. For example, and we can lens. Let's run this application again. Okay, so here you can see the content of UI label is going beyond the screen and it is not visible at all. Okay, so now we are going to use auto layout and see how can we fix it. Okay, so we have to add constraints to this UI label so that it can calculate its own frame. Okay, so since UI label is a first kind of view which have its own content, we have to just provide its x and y position. Okay, so we are saying okay, so if you see this particular icon here, right side bottom, okay, click on that. Here you can define, you can see uh, we have struts kind of, so just enable it, and here you can provide any values. So as of now we are just going to put 00, and here you can see there is something called update frames. If you want to update frames immediately after uh, adding the constraints, you can choose this option, items to new constraints, and when you click on add to constraints here, the frame will automatically resize. Okay, let's see what happens. See what happens now. So again we have a problem here. you can see here. So we have given X and Y position, and it is calculated in its own size, but since there are no other constraints, it is going beyond the screen. Okay, so this is kind of uh, we don't want this thing, right? So we have to fix it again. So what we are going to do is we have to define the right boundary also. Okay, so for that we can add some more constraints. So click on this thing again, and the right size again we can add one constraint here. So we have added it. Okay, and let's run it again and let's see what happens. Okay, so we got our UI label perfectly fine, right? So this is how it works. So this is just a UI label. Okay, we can have more complex structure of UI views. Okay, so let's do it. Let's add some more constraints for more UI views. um, I will add one button here. Okay, so let's run without adding any constraints to the button. Oops. So you can see, since there are no constraints, there are no rules, so the button is placed randomly on the UI view, on super view. Okay, so we have to do something about it. So what we want is, actually we have to put this button in the center of the, just center below of the UI label. Okay, so select the UI button, select, press Ctrl, and if you drag, you can see this kind of animation. Okay, option, just drop it and it will give you options what you want to do with. Okay, so what are the constraints you want to define to UI button. Okay, so first thing is we can set some vertical spacing, or maybe we can say that, okay, no, leading edges should be equal, or maybe they should be centered horizontally, or maybe their right edges should be equal, or these kind of stuff, these kind of options we have. But as of now we just want that it should maintain some spacing. Okay, from in vertical, uh, it should maintain some vertical spacing, so we are just selecting that thing. So um, let me change the color of this thing. Okay, so if you select this option, you can see this red line. So red lines can be for multiple reasons. So two major reasons are, first, it is not um, having proper constraints so that it can define its own frame. Second, there are too many constraints, and in that case also it cannot define its own frame. So here we are dealing with the first type, where it is not having enough constraints so that it can calculate its own frame. So what we are going to do is, you can see, you can select the left panel and click on this red icon you can see here, right? It will tell you what is going wrong. So what it is saying is, need constraints for X position. Okay, so what is this? When we added this spacing, remember, so this is basically, it is giving a Y position of Y position of Y position to the button, but there's no other rules or no constraints so that it can calculate where to stay in horizontal position. Okay, so for that we have to add one more constraint. So what we want is that the button should be in the center. Okay, so there are multiple options you can do, But simple option is just select control and drag it. Okay, so you can see there are multiple options appear. Okay, so you can we have we are going to make it horizontally center. Okay, so we can choose this option, center horizontally. So this new constraint added now, right? So let's run it again. Let's see what happens. Oops. So we have to add some color here, probably maybe white color rather than clear, because clear color is basically just clearing all the colors. Okay, so we got the frames. Okay, so the button is able to frame itself. It can calculate its own frame and it is setting it properly, right? So we got what we wanted to. Fine. So this is a very basic example where that multiple views and we are setting accordingly. So basically, whenever you are trying to add constraints, so you have to remember that there must be minimum satisfiable constraints. Okay, so minimum satisfiable constraints are basically minimum rules, so that each and every views each and every subviews of a view controller's view should be able to calculate its own frame. Okay, so these we can see here these two UI views are basically have their own content. So button also has a text, same UI label also has its own text, so it can calculate their how much area it's needed, it's needs they needed for calculating the frame. Okay, but there are some other views where they don't have any um, constraint sorry, any content, right? So they cannot calculate the height and the width of their own, so we have to provide more constraints there. Okay, for example, this is UI view. Let's change the color of this thing, probably something blue. Okay, so let's run it without any constraints. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it is appearing as it is, but let's probably let's make it a bit smaller. So let's see what happens. See, so since there are no rules, no constraints, it is just randomly calculating its frame and its setting. Okay, so let's put some constraints here. In the previous for the previous views, subviews of like UI label and UI button, we have just given X and Y positions. Let's try to do the same thing with UI view. I'll just add Y position as it is appearing 6 and just add to constraint. Now see we got the red lines, right? And red lines means something is wrong. So what is wrong? We'll check here. See, the first thing is it doesn't have the width, right? And second, it doesn't have height, correct? Because it doesn't have its own content, it cannot calculate how much width and how much height it needs, right? So we have to add it. So there are two ways. First, either we can set the boundaries, or we can explicitly provide height and width, correct? So let's define the boundaries. Okay, so this we have already given the x position, so starting position is fine, right? And we have already given y position, starting y position, and that is fine. Now the end y position, because we are giving boundaries, we are putting boundaries, the y position doesn't have any constraint, so we can say that it's it should align to um, its super view, correct? Because we are giving a 0, right? Okay, so we have defined the left boundary and we have defined the right boundary, right? So since we have defined these two boundaries, it can calculate its own width, correct? So for example, you know one point A and you know point B, so you can calculate how much distance it is between these 2 points. Same way here also, since we have given left boundary and right boundary, it can calculate its own width, but it is missing something. What? See here, this is the height. It is missing height because we have given the top boundary, that is y position, but we have not defined the bottom boundary. So we can define it. We can just say select it. Same way like we have defined the right boundary, we can define the bottom boundary, and it is saying 388. For timing, let it be like that. So now that red line's gone, means everything looks good. Let's try to run it. Okay, but something doesn't seem right. What? If you see here the blue UI view, here the height appears less, but here height is more, right? It is appearing a little bit big. So what is the problem? Why it is happening? So this is happening because of the size of the simulator, correct? We have given this boundary as 388 points, right? So what it is doing is it is calculating how much height it is, how much space actually it is there from bottom of the simulator, and based on that it is defining the boundary. I think I am clear. So it is calculating from the bottom of the simulator, and wherever these 388 pixels are there, sorry, points are there, exactly at that point it is defining, it is keeping the boundary of the UI view, correct? But this is not we wanted, right? So this was the one way to define the constraint, so that a UI view or a view can calculate its own height. But this is not exactly what we wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this thing, this rule. Okay, you can select and delete, and I am going to add one more rule, but this time instead of defining the boundary, I am explicitly saying what this height should be. Okay, so if you select this option height here, you can see it is 128 as of now. So I will let it be like that, and I just added it. So now run it again. Yes, so this is okay. Okay, so this is kind of cool. You can see. So this is exactly what it should be. So it is 128 points. So So this was the second way of defining a constraint or rule, so that the frame can be defined for any particular UI view. So first was defining the boundary, and based on that it can calculate its own frame. This was the second type, where you are explicitly saying how much width or how much height you want for one particular view. So I think this is good for introduction. I'll be coming again with more detailed information about we can um, make complex structures, and how can uh, we kind of set tools for different devices, so that a single particular view looks different in, for example, iPad, or it looks different in iPhone. So just for starting, I think it is good. um, you can check the second part of this. Thank you.